Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Overnight we've had a big rules drop from Corvus Belli, changing some major rules around mainly movement, but also some other very impactful changes. So without any further ado, let's jump in. Alright everybody, so here we are in the big list of changes Corvus Belli's put out on the blog, where our first big change is page 17 with the order count, which now changes how limited insertion orders are counted, so that if a unit is in airborne deployment or in hidden deployment, they don't count towards your order count for the purposes of your orders being stripped if you're doing limited insertion. This is a really big change, and also I think a really good change, as it means that you can make more viable and more varied limited insertion lists. I've had a few friends come to me, with quite interesting limited insertion lists, in military orders, maybe spamming Trinitarians and Crusaders just to try and wiggle around that. Uh, to which I've had to say, sorry, that's not the way the rule works. But I'm very glad to see it change this way. I still don't think that limited insertion is going to be a meta strategy, but I think this will hopefully make it more fun for people, which would be really great. Alright, next up, general movement rules. You can now move through both allied or neutral models. So it used to just be allied models. Now neutral models can also be moved through. Neutral models, markers, and tokens. It's a nice little change. It doesn't really affect too much. This is mostly going to affect moving through things like civilians and evacuation, but past that, nothing incredible there. Then we have cautious movement, that's gotten a bit of a change, and changed the restrictions, meaning that hidden deployment models can't react to cautious movement by having line of fire or being in ZOC. So, this means, say if you're trying to go into camouflage, someone can reveal a hidden deployment model and affect you because of it. That's not the case with hidden deployment models. Just makes cautious movement a little bit easier, but again, nothing huge there. Then we get down here to jump and climb, and I think these are the really big changes. So, jump and super jump have been identified by some people as a bit of a problem, and was kind of one of the reasons that made units like Norkia so strong was having an 8-inch super jump. Same with, say the Seraph. Though, I wouldn't consider the Seraph overpowered just because of the environment it's in. But, being able to get that 8-8 movement out of a tag, or even just drop troops being incredibly powerful, having a 6-6 movement with that super jump. So, jump's been changed quite a bit. The way jump now works is that the skill itself, jump, is that you declare the jump skill, and you move equal to your inches plus the first plus 2 inches for your movement value. Then when you get to super jump says it turns that into a short skill, but it can only be declared for the first movement. So let's say you're Norkius and you want to do your jumping. You declare jump for your first skill. You move equal to your first move distance plus 2 inches. And then you can't jump again. So it's quite a big change that cuts the maneuverability quite a bit. And you can see here, with the red eye, for example, they've changed jump 8 inches to super jump 3 inches. So what the number in brackets means is that it replaces the extra 2 inches you get from the jump skill with the number in brackets here. So while the red eye is moving, has an 8-inch first movement value, if it were to declare jump, it would be moving 11 inches with that jump, not 5 inches, which is if you added this number to the 2 inches. So when you look at how this works for vehicles, previously vehicles were able to move 8-8, get that 16-inch movement. Now all the vehicles have had this change to the super jump 3 inches. So that means with their first movement, they're able to move 11 inches, which frankly is pretty incredible. But then they're only moving that 2 inches on the back end of their movement. They've also specified that while you can only declare jump once, you you have to declare it as the first short skill. So you can't, for example, first order just declare move, then second order declare jump. It has to be jump first. So you can see here we've had some changes to super jump on a lot of units, but there's still some units, where it hasn't been changed or it hasn't quite been cleaned up. Units like the Shikami, units like, of course, young Norkius. But I'm assuming that's all going to come in time. So climb is pretty similar in some ways. Climb has gone back essentially to how it was in N4, where you can now just sort of move over obstacles just using the move skill. So the big change was that you had to declare climb, and climb, that declaration is still part of the game, and it's still part of the climbing plus rules where you can declare climb as a skill, but it still requires you to be in base contact with scenery, yada yada yada. But you can also just do a regular move now and just sort of, climb around the place, just sticking to vertical surfaces like you would in N4. So climb is pretty similar, where you're getting the first value of your move plus 2 inches. So if we go back up, we can see units like the Nis changes climb 8 inches to climb 3 inches. So that means their first movement value is 6. You say, okay, I want to climb. You add that 3, so they can climb 9 inches. But again, that's with the climb skill, which is very restrictive, which is something to keep in mind as well. Now, climbing plus says, if you're doing it this way, you can declare climb as, only the first skill of the order. But if you have climbing plus, essentially, it's pretty useless for you to ever declare climb because you can just move. There are only some really very limited circumstances where you declare climb because you do get extra movement out of it, as long as you're, starting at that base and ending at the top. But again, um, really, you're only using climbing plus to be able to get that scaling with the move value. I think this is a really impactful change, really affecting units such as, the Tick Belang and the Zeta, who've been hit pretty hard by it. And then, some other units here and there where climbing plus sort of became a bit of a dead skill. So I'm actually really happy to see this change. A lot of Nomad units I really enjoy, now kind of returning to their glory, which is fantastic. So overall, I think these changes are good. I think giving Super Jump a bit of a knockdown, uh, is healthy for the game, but also, they haven't nerfed it into the ground. You're still getting that your first short skill Super Jump is going to be really powerful. And then Climbing Plus, really glad to see these changes. I mean, Climbing Plus kind of fell dead on arrival in N5, now being returned to its former glory. It's really nice, while still keeping, the old climb rules intact for non-Climbing Plus users, which is really great as well. But yeah, overall, really nice change. I think in N5 I was even, using the climb skill, even with units who had climbing plus most of the time was pretty useless, and you'd much rather just do a whole order jump. You'd usually get extra movement, and there wasn't much reason to climb over jump. So this is a really nice change. Fantastic change. All right. Next up, we've got just sort of a bit of, and there is a lot of general just sort of little tweaks and changes, just to, improve clarity and that sort of thing. But the first big one here, page 74, armed turrets are now non-reloadable. So this means while they're still a piece of deployable equipment, you can't reload them off of baggage. So this is a pretty big deal. We've kind of heard rumblings around the community of armed turrets maybe being a bit too strong and turret spam, being a method of play that can be effective and also, sort of non-interactive. And of course, we saw the winner of CanCon use turrets to really great effect. And again, being able to reload those turrets. So non-reloading turrets means that you've only got that one turret. It can't be reloaded off baggage, which, I hadn't personally encountered turrets being a huge issue. They were quite effective, but if a game was getting away from you and your opponent started deploying turrets, it could be pretty difficult. It was also, a pretty decent way to punish null deployment. If if your opponent's going second and null deploy, if you don't feel like you can pull off an alpha strike, you could just spend the turn laying out turrets and make it really difficult for your opponent to advance. I think I'm going to enjoy the way this is going to lead turrets to be used. Before, you just kind of haphazardly toss out a turret if you had a spare order, or if you essentially had the time and space to do so. But now I think this is going to make people think a lot more about how they use the turret and the position they put it in. You've still got some very high value turrets like emitter turrets and glue turrets, but now you're going to have to think a lot more carefully about when you're going to use them and how you're going to position them, which I think is a change that leads to, a lot more thinking and consideration in the games, a lot more tactical thinking than how they were previously used, and can avoid some no fun situations in games. Overall, I think it's a good change. Bit of a shame to some extent, just having the one, but I understand the change. Is this a push too far? Maybe. I mean, maybe we could have seen turrets, have two uses, that sort of thing. But overall, if the rule was going to change, I'm pretty happy with this rules change. It's pretty cool. All right, next up, big change with Speedball. A unit with a Speedball, it no longer triggers or gets used on themselves for Vitapack, Auto Repair, and Switch On, I believe. So this means that, the way we saw Speedball being used was you'd get your big piece, maybe it's your tag, maybe it's Joan of Arc, maybe it's a Shikami. You'd call down the Speedball before they went on their attack run to essentially make them an extra wound or, one time use just not getting hacked. And this really what this led to was stronger alpha strikes. You'd have this piece, you could take an extra hit, even if your opponent had set up, a decent defense, you could sometimes just push through that with the Vita Pack, or just avoid some bad luck as well. And this meant that the design goal for Speedball was really meant to be sort of a catch-up recovery mechanic, but it ended up being a mechanic that let you be more aggressive than you would be otherwise, which I don't think is the direction CB necessarily wanted it to go. And we're seeing this rules change now, which sort of exemplifies this. Now, you're still probably going to end up using Speedball in a similar way, but not so much on solo units. Let's say you've got a linked gun in a fire team. Previously, you might put a Vita Pack on that linked gun, just in case you lose a face to face roll. Well, now what happens is you're putting that Vita Pack on, the second unit in the fire team, so that if and when that unit takes a wound, the other guy goes up and picks him up with that Vita Pack. Now, it is a pretty it's a decent change. Let's go back to that example of the units in the fire team. Let's say my shooter there is just a niece, just a one wound unit. He takes a wound with the old Vita Pack rules, instantly bang, gets back up. He doesn't leave the fire team. You don't need another order. Where in this case, I shoot with the niece, gets, hit by something in ARO, goes down. I now have to spend the order from the other unit to get that Vita Pack onto him, and then spend a command token to reform that link. So it's the costs are a lot more in getting that Vita Pack off. And if I yeet Joan into someone's deployment zone and she takes a couple wounds, trying to get somebody there who can pick up that Vita Pack, it's gonna be quite a lot harder. Now, I think even though they don't automatically trigger, I think you can still use them with an order on yourself. So I think you may still be able to, you know, get the Vita Pack on Joan, but still have to use an order for her to use it on herself. Which again, it's an extra order, or an extra half an order. I think it's still pretty impactful. And if it's something like Switch On, if someone's bricked you and the Switch On doesn't automatically trigger, well, you're not necessarily. I don't think you can. If you're carbonated, for example, or you're isolated, you can't receive more orders. You can't then use the speedball on yourself because you either don't have the orders or can only reset. So Pretty big changes with Speedball. I think overall good changes. I think, very early on we were able to see units, getting quite a big boost just from Speedball usage. I don't think it was necessarily a huge problem. I never came across a unit using a Speedball where it was, mega fucked because of the Speedball. I think I found Switch On to be the most impactful, just shoring up those defenses of the heavier units. But overall, I think this is a pretty good change. And yeah, happy days. All right, next up, the booty chart. They've just changed that a little bit, where they don't have that weird, uh, tag, if not tag. They don't have that anymore. But nothing much past that. All right, now Fireteam Master and Inspiring Leadership both got a bit of a change. They both picked up kind of a shared similar skill that says essentially if all the units in this fire team are regular, so this won't apply to something like Lian Kai and Shaolin monks necessarily, unless I don't know how the regular kind of thing interacts with Fighting Master and Inspiring Leadership. Uh, Already have the regular training characteristic, so it's not going to work with like Lian Kai and the Shaolin monks. But you get a +2 bonus on your coherency check, which I think is I'm going to put in William Wallace getting number 2 tier of rules change. I mean, it's nice, it's something, but an extra 2 inches, that can be sort of hard to eyeball. What's the practical effect of that on the table? I'm not really sure there is one. And I'm not really sure that, in terms of Fireteam Masters, that they necessarily want to be that far away from each other. If I've got a Taskmaster and 2 Morlocks, or Quingo and 2 Shaolin monks, I don't know if I want them to be 10 inches away from each other. I mean, it's might be decent kind of defensively, but I don't know. I guess I'd rather be hiding, rather be kind of getting ready to push an assault. I don't necessarily see where this ends up on the table. And then with the inspiring leadership units, you're really only looking at Joan and Wally. And I don't see where Joan or Wally's units they would link with would want that distance either. Um, but yeah, no, it's an interesting change. And I think it is nice to kind of give that little something. Could it have been a more impactful change? Probably, but whatever. Marksmanship, they also cleaned up marksmanship a little bit, where now it's explicitly affected by white noise. There was a bit of confusion there, and it's not optional. So you can't choose not to use marksmanship, which is pretty funny. All right. Then cleaned up mine layer a bit just to make that a bit clearer. Of course, we've had the super jump changes. They've cleaned up total reaction too. There was a few people who, didn't really buy into the whole, Thunderbolt +1 burst getting that in reactive. Now they explicitly do, which is quite nice. Multispectral Visor level 3 got a bit of a change to sort of just clean it up. It is a nerf overall, but essentially, uh, it's cleaned up now to say you only see through that marker on your turn, and if you're declaring a ballistic skill. So if a unit, if a camo unit's moving in front of line of sight of a multispectral visor level 3 unit uh, in the active turn for the camo marker, the MSV3 unit can't declare shoot at it because it's not their active turn. So a nice change there. Multispectral visor level 3 could be a pretty hard matchup check. Um, and yeah, this just gives people a bit more of a chance to play around it. Nano screen, they also changed a bit just to make it so that it doesn't help you against comms attacks. And really, this is jammers and cyber mines, and that's about it in terms of kind of practically what this is going to affect. I think this kind of stepped in the direction of making cyber mines kind of more useful and kind of more having their place where they count as a comms attack, which gets around nano screen, gets around, of course, immunity BTS, um, gets around immunity, yeah, and gets around immunities, which is really interesting. So I think this actually pushes the cyber mine kind of another step closer to being relevant, which is a bit sad to say. But yeah, no, it's quite cool. Like it quite a bit. All right, and then here's where it is. The command token strategic use for stripping. This is where they sort of set that out, which is really nice. And then other than that, just more sort of little changes and cleanups. But those were the main changes in terms of what's really going to affect your game. Also, some things got some anti-material, which is nice in, missions like looting and sabotage, where, factions like Ariadne didn't necessarily have those anti-material options. So now T2CC weapons are getting anti-material, which is really nice to see. So those are the major rules changes, and we can see, there have been some unit profile changes to reflect those changes, but I would expect more to come kind of in this way, where we've still got units like the Shikami, units like Norkius, haven't had this change yet. I expect that will come. Then the last thing we got is for the ITS rules, where we have a new seasonal rule. So we've got some really nice fluff here, which is quite cool. And then during the season, until further notice, players may apply the following mid-season event rule. So really, this is up to your TO if it wants to be used or not, but it's in line with other seasonal rules. And it's an ops rule. This time, stealth ops. So you pick a unit who's on the game table, not a marker. Uh, Units without motorcycles, whose troop type is not Remtag or vehicle, they get to be stealth ops, so you pick one of them. They get the stealth special skill, which is massive if you put it on, some kind of assault heavy infantry, and a silenced pistol. Now, silenced pistols, I haven't really seen them personally too much on the table. They're still kind of a very rare piece of kit, but they are pretty powerful, essentially being a DA shot, putting your opponent at neg 6 outside of line of fire. Quite nice. So just getting a bit of a proliferation of that weapon, I think is quite nice, giving people more of a chance to use the silenced pistol. And then stealth, ugh. Stealth's really powerful. I can imagine people finding some pretty scuffed units to put stealth on. But overall, it's a fun rule. I'm glad to see them sort of doing it mid-season just to mix it up a bit. And this bit of fluff's really nice. I think one thing Infinity could really use more of is, putting more into its lore, making that more important. And we're seeing that with the TV show, which looks really cool so far. So overall, very cool change here. So big takeaways from this new rules release. Your movement rules have changed quite a bit. Super jumps got nerfed, which is fantastic. Climbing plus has gotten buffed, which has got to be my favorite change. I think the armed turrets is probably the biggest change past that, as well as the rules affecting, stripping orders for limited insurgent, which, yeah, it's fantastic. The big takeaway here as well is, Corvus Bailey says it here at the start. They're trying to be more proactive with their approach to rules and more kind of active in their management of the game for the competitive scene, which is great. Uh, I think a lot of people got frustrated in N4 where there were kind of, some people would say very clear balance outliers or changes that a lot of people felt needed to happen where CB wouldn't really do too much. So I think, this is great to address that, shows CB, being really on the ball, and then also told us to expect another more in-depth review towards the end of the year, which, we could expect to see some buffs, nerfs there. Just have to see how things shake out over the year. So once again, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this shorter video, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.